The bustling energy of the airport, which had once filled Anita with excitement, now seemed overwhelming. Her heart raced as she stared at the torn remnants of her boarding pass fluttering into the trash can. It was as though Colette had ripped apart more than just paper. She had shredded Anita's confidence, her pride, and her excitement for the journey home. Anita swallowed hard, forcing back the tears that threatened to spill. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Was it something she said? Did she do something wrong? But no, she had been nothing but polite. The flight attendant, Colette, had already turned her attention to the next passenger, her sharp smile plastered back on as though nothing had happened. Anita's voice shook as she mustered the courage to speak. "Ma'am, please. That was my ticket. How am I supposed to board without it?" Colette shot her a glance, her expression a mix of irritation and disdain. "I told you to take it up with customer service. I don't have time for this." Anita felt the stares of other passengers as the line behind her grew longer. Their whispered comments only added to her humiliation. She bit her lip, clenching her fists to stop her hands from trembling. "But she began, her voice breaking. "Next," Colette barked, ignoring her entirely. Anita stepped aside, her mind spinning. She didn't want to cause a scene, but what could she do now? Her parents had always taught her to stay composed in difficult situations, but this was something she had never prepared for. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers shaking as she scrolled through her contacts. She hesitated before dialing the number, a tiny voice in her head reminding her that she was supposed to handle this trip on her own. But what choice did she have? The call connected after a few rings. "Hello, Anita," her father's familiar voice came through, calm and steady as always. "Dad." Anita's voice cracked as the dam finally broke. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she recounted what had happened, her words tumbling out in a rush. There was silence on the other end for a moment, followed by her father's measured tone. "Stay where you are, sweetheart. I'll handle this." Anita nodded. Even though he couldn't see her, she wiped her tears and took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Anita lowered the phone, her father's steady reassurance still echoing in her ears. She clutched it tightly, as if it were a lifeline, her legs trembling beneath her. The airport suddenly felt enormous and unfriendly, the sea of strangers rushing by making her feel invisible. Colette, meanwhile, continued her work, her sharp smile returning as she greeted the next passenger in line. The stark contrast between her politeness to others and her treatment of Anita stung. Anita took a shaky step back, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt as if every pair of eyes in the terminal was on her, silently judging her for being the troublemaker. The shredded remains of her ticket were still visible in the trash, a cruel reminder of what had just happened. She replayed the moment in her mind, searching for answers. Why would someone act like that? Was it because I'm young? Because I'm traveling alone? Or because she swallowed the thought before it could fully form, refusing to believe her skin color or appearance could have played a role? "Miss, you're holding up the line," a man behind her muttered impatiently. Anita forced herself to step aside, her cheeks burning with humiliation. She found a quiet corner near the window and sank into a chair, staring out at the planes lined up on the tarmac. Her father's calm, authoritative voice echoed in her memory. "Stay where you are. I'll handle it." Just as Anita was mustering the courage to approach customer service, the air around her shifted. A commotion near the entrance drew her attention. Heads turned as a group of men in suits strode through the terminal, their presence commanding and purposeful. At the center of the group was Kingston Lamini, her father. His tall, imposing figure moved with quiet authority, his tailored suit and polished shoes reflecting the light. His expression was calm, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the crowd until they landed on Anita. "Dad," Anita called, relief flooding her voice as she stood up. Kingston's face softened ever so slightly when he saw her. He strode toward her with long, purposeful steps, his entourage trailing behind him. When he reached her, he placed a firm hand on her shoulder, his presence immediately grounding her. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low but filled with concern. Anita nodded, though her throat felt tight again. "She tore up my ticket," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Kingston's jaw tightened, but his expression remained composed. "Stay here," he said, his tone gentle but firm. Turning on his heel, he marched toward the check-in counter, where Colette was chatting with another passenger. She looked up as he approached, her smile faltering when she saw the determined set of his face. "Are you the one in charge here?" Kingston's voice cut through the noise like a blade. Colette straightened, her professional smile returning as she quickly adjusted her posture. "Yes, sir. How can I assist you today?" "You can start by explaining why my daughter's boarding pass was destroyed," Kingston said, his tone calm but laced with steel. Colette blinked, momentarily caught off guard. Her eyes flickered to Anita, who was standing a short distance away, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Your daughter," Colette stammered. "Yes, my daughter," Kingston said, enunciating each word with precision. "And I want to know why she was treated so poorly." Colette's face paled. "Sir, I didn't realize." Kingston raised a hand, cutting her off. "You didn't realize what? That she was my daughter, or that your behavior was unacceptable." The crowd around them had grown silent, the scene drawing the attention of passengers and staff alike. Colette's confident demeanor was rapidly unraveling under Kingston's scrutiny. "Sir, I was just following protocol," she said weakly. "Protocol?" Kingston repeated, his tone icy. "What protocol involves tearing up a passenger's boarding pass and dismissing them like they're less than human?" Colette trailed off, her usual sharpness dulled by the weight of Kingston's gaze. Kingston turned to the airline officials who had accompanied him. "I expect this incident to be investigated thoroughly," he said, "and I expect a formal apology to my daughter, not because of who I am, but because of what she deserves as a paying customer and a human being." The officials nodded hurriedly, their faces tight with nervousness. "Of course, Mr. Dlamini. We'll ensure this is handled immediately." Kingston glanced at Colette one last time, his expression unreadable. "Remember this. The way you treat people, no matter who they are, speaks volumes about you. I suggest you think about that carefully." With that, he turned back to Anita. Anita looked up at her father, her emotions a whirlwind of relief, gratitude, and lingering hurt. "Thank you, Dad," she said quietly. Kingston placed a hand on her shoulder, his gaze steady. "You don't have to thank me, Anita. No one has the right to treat you, or anyone else, that way. Remember that." Anita nodded, his words sinking in. For the first time since the incident, she felt a spark of strength returning to her. As they walked toward the private jet arranged by the airline, Anita stole one last glance at Colette, who stood frozen at the counter, her expression a mix of regret and fear. Anita straightened her shoulders, a newfound determination settling over her. This was a moment she would never forget, a reminder that even in the face of injustice, she was never truly alone. The murmurs of the crowd swirled around Anita like a storm, amplifying her already racing heart. Her father stood tall beside her, a wall of unshakable resolve, while Colette, once so confident, seemed to shrink with every passing second. Colette fumbled with her words, her usual sharpness dulled by the intensity of Kingston's gaze. "Sir, I didn't mean," she began, but Kingston held up a hand, silencing her. "This isn't about what you meant," he said, his voice steady and cutting through the air like a blade. "It's about what you did. You humiliated my daughter, tore up her ticket, and dismissed her like she was beneath you. If she hadn't called me, what would have happened? Would you have cared then?" Colette's eyes darted to Anita, who stood silently, her expression unreadable. I thought," Colette stammered, her voice faltering. "You thought she wasn't important." Kingston finished for her, his tone heavy with disgust. "You thought you could treat her however you wanted because, in your mind, she was just a kid, just another passenger who couldn't fight back. The crowd around them grew quieter, the weight of Kingston's words settling over everyone. Anita glanced at the people watching, some shaking their heads in disapproval of Colette, others simply staring in awe at Kingston's commanding presence. Colette's face turned a shade paler. "It wasn't personal," she said weakly. "I was having a busy day, and I might have been short with her, but—" "Busy," Kingston cut in, his voice rising slightly, his frustration finally seeping through. "You think that justifies what you did. Being busy doesn't give you the right to treat people like they don't matter. It's your job to ensure passengers are treated with respect, no matter who they are or what kind of day you're having." Anita, who had remained quiet until now, finally found her voice. "You didn't even listen to me," she said, her tone calm but firm. "I tried to ask a question, and you made me feel like I was wasting your time. When you tore up my ticket, I felt like I didn't matter." Colette flinched at Anita's words. I'm sorry," she said again, her voice barely above a whisper. "It wasn't my intention to make you feel that way." Anita looked at her father, unsure of how to respond. His face was calm but stern, and when he spoke, his tone was softer, though no less resolute. "Apologies only mean something if they're backed by action," Kingston said. "Right now, you're only apologizing because you know who I am. But this isn't about me. It's about how you treat people when you think no one's watching. My daughter deserves better. Everyone does." Colette opened her mouth to respond, but Kingston held up a hand again. "I've said what I need to say. The rest is up to the airline to handle." He turned to the group of airline officials, who had been standing silently on the sidelines. "I trust this matter will be addressed appropriately," he said. One of the officials, a man with graying hair and an air of nervous professionalism, stepped forward. "Absolutely, Mr. Dlamini. We'll launch a full investigation into this incident. In the meantime, we'd like to offer you and your daughter an upgrade to first class for your trouble." Kingston's expression didn't change. "This isn't about upgrades or perks. It's about accountability. Make sure it doesn't happen again." The official nodded quickly, clearly eager to appease him. As the confrontation came to a close, Anita became acutely aware of the onlookers. Some passengers looked sympathetic, others impressed by her father's composure. But there was one woman, a middle-aged mother with 2 young children, who caught Anita's eye. She gave Anita a small, encouraging smile, mouthing the words, "Good for you." Anita felt a wave of unexpected pride. She straightened her shoulders, her earlier embarrassment melting away. Colette, meanwhile, was led away by one of the officials, her face a mask of regret and unease. The crowd began to disperse, the buzz of conversation filling the air as people returned to their routines. Kingston turned to Anita, his expression softening as he placed a hand on her shoulder. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" Anita nodded, but her voice wavered as she said, I don't understand why she treated me like that." Kingston sighed, his face thoughtful. "Some people judge others by what they see on the surface. It's wrong, but it happens. What matters is how you respond to it. You stood your ground, Anita, and I'm proud of you for that." Anita looked down at her shoes, her father's words sinking in. She still felt a lingering sting from the experience, but there was also a growing sense of empowerment. "Do you think she'll change?" Anita asked, glancing in the direction Colette had been led away. Kingston's expression grew serious. "I hope so. But whether she changes or not, you've learned something important today. You've seen how to stand up for yourself and how to expect better from others." Anita nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. "Thanks, Dad." Kingston smiled back. "Always, sweetheart. Now, let's get you home." Anita and Kingston were escorted by the airline staff to a quieter lounge area, away from the hustle and bustle of the terminal. Despite the turmoil of the past hour, Anita felt a newfound calm settle over her. Her father's presence, his firm yet composed handling of the situation, reminded her why she admired him so deeply. The airline had arranged for a private car to take them to the runway, where a sleek first-class cabin awaited their boarding. As Anita sat by the lounge window, staring at the planes lined up on the tarmac, her thoughts lingered on Colette. "Dad," she said, her voice breaking the silence between them. "Do you think she really understood what she did wrong?" Kingston looked up from his phone, where he'd been responding to work emails, and studied his daughter's face. "People like her rarely see the full picture in the moment," he said. "She's likely too focused on the consequences to reflect right now. But when things quiet down, and she thinks back on this day, she'll have a choice to make." Anita tilted her head. "A choice?" Kingston nodded. "She can either learn from this and change, or she can stay the same and keep hurting others. The lesson is there. It's up to her whether she takes it." Anita thought about his words, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the armrest of her chair. She hoped Colette would learn, not just for her sake, but for the sake of anyone else who might encounter her in the future. As the jet prepared for takeoff, Anita and Kingston settled into the plush first-class seats. Anita gazed out the window, watching the ground shrink below them as the plane ascended into the clouds. For the first few minutes, neither of them spoke, the hum of the engines filling the silence. But Anita couldn't stop her thoughts from racing. She turned to her father, her voice hesitant. "Dad, if I didn't call you, if you weren't who you are, do you think anyone would have listened to me?" Kingston's expression turned serious. "That's a hard truth, Anita. Sometimes people only take action when they're afraid of who's watching or what they might lose. But that doesn't mean your voice doesn't matter. It does. And today, you made them listen, not because of me, but because you stood your ground." Anita nodded slowly, her father's words sinking in. She knew he was right, but the thought of how easily Colette had dismissed her still stung. She vowed to herself that if she ever saw someone else being treated unfairly, she wouldn't stay silent. As the flight continued, a stewardess approached their seats with a tray of refreshments. She was polite and professional, her demeanor a stark contrast to Colette's. After serving Kingston, she hesitated, then turned to Anita with an envelope in her hand. "This is from the airline's regional manager," the stewardess explained, handing the envelope to Anita. Anita exchanged a curious glance with her father before opening it. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Dear Miss Dlamini, on behalf of the entire airline, I want to sincerely apologize for the treatment you received earlier today. What happened was unacceptable and does not reflect the values we strive to uphold as a company. The flight attendant involved in the incident has been placed on immediate leave pending a full investigation. We are committed to ensuring that no passenger experiences what you did today. Your courage in speaking up has made us reflect on how we can do better. Thank you for reminding us of the importance of treating every individual with dignity and respect. Sincerely, Alan Reese, Regional Director, Skyvista Airlines." Anita stared at the letter for a moment, her emotions swirling. It felt strange to be praised for something she hadn't intended to do. She hadn't spoken up to prove a point. She'd done it because she had no other choice. Kingston watched her closely. "How do you feel?" he asked. Anita folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. "I don't know," she admitted. "I guess I'm glad they're taking it seriously, but I just wish it didn't have to happen in the first place." Kingston smiled faintly. "That's how real change starts, Anita, when people like you make others see what they've been ignoring." As the plane descended toward their destination, Anita looked out the window, watching the city lights grow brighter and clearer. She felt different, stronger, somehow. The experience at the airport had shaken her, but it had also taught her something valuable. Her voice mattered. When they landed, Kingston hugged her tightly before they left the terminal. "I'm proud of you," he said softly. "You handled today with grace and strength. Never forget that." Anita smiled up at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thanks, Dad, for everything." As they walked toward the waiting car, Anita caught sight of a young girl sitting with her mother in the terminal. The girl waved shyly, and Anita waved back, her mind returning to the lesson her father had shared earlier. The way you treat people when you think no one's watching speaks volumes about who you are. With her father by her side and a newfound determination in her heart, Anita resolved to carry that lesson with her always, and to be the kind of person who treated others with the respect they deserved, no matter what. Kindly endeavor to subscribe, share, like, and engage in the comment. Thanks for watching.